Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life. Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Amstrad, get real, get Amstrad.
A beheading is horrific, no matter where it happens. A beheading in France even more so, because you do not associate a modern society with an act so barbaric. Because that's the last thing that should happen in a country built on the principles of freedom, equality and secularism. Everything that France stood for, all the values of French society are under threat as a parallel social order takes shape. Islamic radicalism is clashing with French values. And the result is terror attacks, shootings and beheadings. Now the government has announced a tougher crackdown on Islamist separatism. A few days back, President Macron proposed a new law to create a French version of Islam. The pushback was violent and strong. Where will France go from here? Because what France does to deal with this problem will have lessons for the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss the situation in France, home to the biggest Muslim population in Europe, and the challenge that they're dealing with. Also on the show, Pakistan sees the biggest protest against the Imran Khan government. Maryam Nawaz has dared the Prime Minister to arrest her. She says government crackdown will not crack the opposition's resolve. Thailand protests spread beyond Bangkok. Pro-democracy protesters from Hong Kong pledged support. The government offers talks but will continue to protect the monarchy. Beijing's wolf warriors are taking their title too seriously, it seems. China's so-called diplomats attack a Taiwanese diplomat in Fiji. He ends up in hospital with a head injury. And will the British Prime Minister quit his job because his salary does not cover his expenses? His predecessors apparently are making a lot more just giving lectures. We'll bring you the full story, but we begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
In a huge blow to Pakistan, the country is likely to remain on the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force due to its inability to fulfill 6 key obligations, according to reports. The move is likely to affect Pakistan's financial aid from global bodies at a time when its economy is in shambles. China's economy recovered further from the coronavirus in the third quarter. The world's second largest economy reported third quarter GDP growth at 4.9% from a year ago. Demonstrators faced off with the police on the one-year anniversary of mass protests over inequality in Chile. At least 2 churches have been torched as protests turned violent. A Chinese soldier has been held by Indian security forces in Demchok village in India's Ladakh region. Reports indicate that the soldier, who was carrying a PLA card on him, will be handed over to the Chinese military. The US military has defended its airstrikes against Taliban fighters last week as the insurgent group accused Washington of violating a signed agreement. The Taliban launched a major offensive in the southern province of Helmand in a bid to take its capital, prompting US airstrikes in support of Afghan security forces. On one hand, Xiaomi faced the flack of users with hashtag Xiaomi Jiaoabdo training all day after the Chinese mobile company weather app was not showing details on Arunachal Pradesh. Twitter users from Arunachal Pradesh were quick to tag Xiaomi Mobile over the issue and asked for a clarification from the Chinese mobile brand. The company later clarified that there was a technical error that led the app to not showing the information. The figure of a large, relaxing cat has been discovered in the Nazca Desert in Peru. The Nazca Lines, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is home to designs on the ground known as geoglyphs, created some 2,000 years ago. Scientists believe the cat, as with other Nazca animal figures, was created by making depressions in the desert floor, leaving colored earth exposed. A detailed new report released on Monday highlights North Korea's systemic torture, sexual abuse, and dangerous health conditions that are rife within the pre-trial detention system. The document shines a light on an often opaque criminal justice system in which suspects are considered to be worth less than an animal. Jason Kokrak claimed his maiden title on the PGA Tour with a victory at the CJ Cup in Las Vegas. The American carded a stunning final round of 8 under par 64 at the Shadow Creek course to end a 10-year drought. Kokrak carded 8 birdies in a bogey-free round to turn around a 3-shot deficit at the start of Sunday. Overnight leader Russell Henley never really got going and had to settle tied for 3rd place with Tyrrell Hatton. The closest challenge came from Xander Schauffele, who shot 6 under in his final round, but Kokrak outwitted his playing partner to clinch the title and move into the top 30 of the world rankings. Premier League champions Liverpool have suffered a major blow with star defender Virgil van Dijk set to undergo knee surgery. The Netherlands captain had to leave the field in the 10th minute of the Merseyside derby against Everton on Saturday. The Netherlands captain had to leave the field in the 10th minute of the Merseyside derby against Everton on Saturday after he was fouled by goalkeeper Jordan Pickford. Scans have revealed ligament damage, and ACL injuries usually take a minimum of 6 months to heal. Liverpool have not yet put a time frame on Van Dijk's return, but it is expected that he will be out of action until at least April.
Nothing can be more barbaric and horrific than this. A teacher beheaded in broad daylight. By now, I'm sure most of you know what happened in France on Friday. A teacher was beheaded for showing his students cartoons of Prophet Muhammad. He was teaching them about freedom of expression. The idea cost him his life. The teacher was decapitated by a teenager right outside his school. France has called this a terror attack, an attempt to quote-unquote strike down the republic. Thousands have taken to the streets. This attack has stunned the world. The tide of Islamism is challenging values like freedom of speech and secularism in France. And on Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you how the clash between secularism and Islam cannot be allowed to fester in the name of political correctness anymore. How secularism is not achieved by decree. How and where France failed. And what are the lessons for the world? First, let's bring you up to speed with the investigation. Right after the French teacher was beheaded, police officials hunted down the terrorist. The 18-year-old was found in a town near Paris. What you see on your screen are pictures of that tense confrontation between the police and the terrorist. He was cornered. He had a knife and an airsoft gun that fires plastic pellets. The police first warned him. He was asked to put down his arms. When he refused to cooperate, the police opened fire. The terrorist was killed on the spot. Reports say he acted in a quote-unquote threatening manner, and that is what prompted the police to shoot him. And we are about to play that sequence, that confrontation for you right now. These pictures are graphic. Viewer discretion is advised.
Jette! Allonge-toi! Allonge-toi! Levez pas devant! J'ai l'honneur! Attends!
A major crackdown on extremists is now underway in France. More than 10 people have been arrested in connection with this attack alone. Reports say about 80 police investigations have been opened into online hate messages that glorify the attack on Friday. The French government is gearing up to expel more than 200 foreigners. They were on the government's watch list for their quote-unquote extremist religious beliefs. Meanwhile, thousands of people rallied across France to pay a tribute to the victim. His name is Samuel Paty, a middle school teacher who became a victim of hate. He taught history and geography. Earlier this month, he was taking a class on freedom of expression where he showed a caricature of the Prophet published in Charlie Hebdo. This triggered a furious response from a number of parents. They complained on social media and demanded his resignation. And this is when Paty took special care to not hurt religious sentiments of his Muslim students. He asked them to leave the class before showing the cartoons. He said he did not want to upset them. Soon after the lecture, he began receiving threats to his life. A Muslim parent went public with his complaints. The father of a 13-year-old girl, he posted a video on YouTube. He said the teacher showed a photo of a naked man, that's what he said, and claimed that he was the Muslim prophet. The father called the teacher a thug. He urged other parents to join him in demanding action. This outrage on the internet seems to have reached the 18-year-old who beheaded the teacher. The terrorist was allegedly Russian. He had no links to the school. He attacked Paty in broad daylight and killed him on a suburban street right in front of his school. French President Emmanuel Macron did not hesitate in calling the beheading what it is: an Islamist terrorist attack.
Je veux dire ce soir.
I want to tell all of France's teachers that we are with them, that the whole nation will be here on their side today and tomorrow to protect them, defend them, allow them to do their job, the most beautiful job of raising free citizens. It's not a coincidence if tonight a teacher was struck, because he, the terrorist, wanted to attack the values of the Republic. It's light, the possibility to make our children, no matter where they come from, no matter what they believe or not believe, no matter what their religion is, to make them free citizens. The battle is our battle, and it's an existential one.
Parce qu'il a voulu abattre.
Since then, tens of thousands have rallied across France. The French Prime Minister and the Mayor of Paris joined the gathering yesterday. The beheading brings back memories of the attack on Charlie Hebdo in 2015. Apparently, the teacher showed the Prophet's cartoons every year to his class, making them a part of the discussion about freedom. Last month, accomplices in the 2015 attack went on trial. The French president announced plans to combat Islamic radicalism. It's much needed, and it's not going to be easy for France. Muslims are the largest minority in this country. Almost 9% of the French population is Muslim. They often find themselves at odds with the idea of French secularism. France bans religious symbols like the hijab, but it allows publishing cartoons of the Prophet, calling it freedom of expression. In Islam, depiction of the Prophet in any form is a taboo. The hardliners call the Prophet's cartoons blasphemous. The president says blasphemy is not a crime in France. Clearly, it's an impasse. Radical Islam poses a major challenge to French secularism. So Macron is pushing for a law to craft the French version of Islam. Islam with French values. A version that is compatible with the French society. And this beheading has laid bare all the fault lines in the society. The violent cultural clash between France and Islam is back in focus. In the last 3 years, France has thwarted 32 terror attacks. Macron has described Islam as a religion in crisis. He said radical Islam is the biggest threat to French values. The danger is clear and present. Friday's attack drives home the urgency of the need to act. Our next report tells you why Islam is at odds with France.
France is on the edge. A few days ago, their biggest worry was a second wave of the Wuhan virus. They were arguing over fresh restrictions. Now, a more horrific reality has hit them. Extremism in France has reared its head again. From 2015 to 2016, terrorists killed more than 200 people in Paris and Nice. 4 years later, the beheading of a teacher has brought home the realization that Islamic terrorism is a clear and present danger in France. The attack came just days after French President Emmanuel Macron unveiled his own anti-radicalization plan. In a speech in Paris, he spoke about tackling Islamic separatism.
Ce à quoi nous devons nous attaquer.
What we have to tackle is Islamist separatism. It is a conscious, theorized, politico-religious project which takes shape through repeated deviations from the values of the Republic, often resulting in a constitution of a counter-society. There is in this radical Islamism, since it is the heart of the subject, let us approach it and name it, a claimed will to display a methodical organization to contravene the laws of the Republic and create a parallel order, to erect other values, to develop another organization of society.
Macron's proposal is radical. It's an attempt to reshape Islam into a version that is compatible with the secular ideals of France. The plan has two objectives. One, to integrate the Muslim minority into France. Two, to make Islam immune to radical interpretations. This idea to institutionalize Islam has been met with a violent pushback. Charlie Hebdo was targeted for its cartoons of the Prophet. In 2015, 2 Islamist gunmen opened fire inside its offices. 12 people had died. That attack triggered a wave of violence by the Islamic State in Europe. A state of emergency was imposed to tackle the terror threat. But 5 years later, radical Islam is haunting France again. This year, suspected accomplices went on trial in Paris. A teacher who tried to impart a lesson on Charlie Hebdo was beheaded. The clash of values has left France deeply divided. According to a survey last year, 61% of the French citizens feel that Islam is incompatible with the values of the French society. Nearly 80% said the French values of secularism are in danger. The dangerous rift within society has only increased the security risks. In 2016, the French government reported that it has identified more than 8,000 Islamic radicals. By 2018, France was tracking close to 20,000 extremists. This included people who were in contact with members of the Islamic State. France now has the largest population of Muslims in Western Europe. Its efforts to peacefully integrate the Muslims so far have resulted in deadly consequences. As Macron now pushes to implement his own plans, the French principle of laïcité, or state secularism, faces its ultimate test. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
This is Gujranwala. Look at the momentum. Look at people. They are on ground, they are on roads, they are against the government.
कान पकड़े इमरान नियाजी का या फिर उसके लाने वालों का।
ये तहरीक तब तक चलेगी जब तक पाकिस्तान में आईन और कानून का बोलबाला नहीं होगा।
पूरे पाकिस्तान की जमहूरी कुव्वतें एक स्टेज पे भी है, एक पेज पे भी है। अब इस हुकूमत को, इस सिलेक्टेड को, इनके सिलेक्टर्स को हमारा पेज पे आना पड़ेगा, वरना इन सबको जाना पड़ेगा, जाना पड़ेगा, जाना पड़ेगा।
A united opposition, angry citizens, colourful rallies, fiery speeches. It must be a déjà vu moment for Imran Khan Niazi, the cricketer turned politician who clinched power, riding on a wave of such protests. But barely 2 years of his rule and the tide has turned. The people that Imran Khan once led are now protesting against him. The show of strength is unlike anything the Pakistan Prime Minister would have imagined. The Naya Pakistan he once promised now wants a new leader. Tens of thousands have hit the streets with one demand: Imran Khan's ouster from office. Look at these images. What began in Gujranwala has now spread to Karachi. Citizens, government employees, farmers, teachers, doctors, health workers, pensioners, almost everyone is protesting against the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
This is Gujranwala. Look at the momentum. Look at people. They are on ground. They are on roads. They are against the government. The government who has actually made them fall because they were really lacking on their policies. This is the crowd roaring for a change, and change will come.
हमारा टिकटॉक बंद किया, इसलिए हम आज बिलावल भुट्टो को सपोर्ट करने हैं और इंशाल्लाह इमरान खान जल्दी हटेगा।
Leading these people is a united opposition. They call this movement the beginning of the end for Imran Khan. Almost 9 major opposition parties have come together to launch the Pakistan Democratic Movement, the unlikeliest of political unions. I say this because the differences in their ideologies couldn't have been more stark. What unites them, though, is their goal. They all want Imran Khan out of power, some of them rather desperately.
पूरे पाकिस्तान की जमहूरी कुव्वतें एक स्टेज पे भी है, एक पेज पे भी है। अब इस हुकूमत को, इस सिलेक्टेड को, इनके सिलेक्टर्स को हमारा पेज पे आना पड़ेगा, वरना इन सबको जाना पड़ेगा, जाना पड़ेगा, जाना पड़ेगा।
This was Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, the son of murdered former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. He has emerged as a prominent opposition voice in recent months. He promises to fulfill his mother's dream, make Pakistan a real democracy. Standing with Bilawal Bhutto is another political dynast, Maryam Nawaz, the daughter of yet another former Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif. She's been actively campaigning on Twitter to court the people of Pakistan, urging them to stand by her family. And if social media is any gauge of public opinion, the Sharifs seem to be winning the war of perception.
ये तहरीक तब तक चलेगी जब तक पाकिस्तान को इस नाअहली और नालायकी और सिलेक्टेड हुकूमत से पहुंचने वाले नुकसानों का अजाला नहीं हो जाएगा। ये तहरीक तब तक चलेगी जब तक पाकिस्तान में आईन और कानून का बोलबाला नहीं होगा। ये तहरीक तब तक चलेगी जब तक आपके वोट को इज्जत नहीं मिलेगी।
आपने इलेक्शनों में अवाम के इंतखाब को रद्द करके अपनी मर्जी का नाअहल तोला इस कौम पर मुसल्लत किया। नतीजे में होने वाली बर्बादी के भी आप ही जिम्मेदार हैं। जनरल बाजवा साहब, जवाब आपको ही देना पड़ेगा, आपको।
So the war has begun. The opposition couldn't have been more determined, and Imran Khan's tactics couldn't have been dirtier. Shortly after the Sharifs escalated their attack on the Prime Minister, Maryam Nawaz's husband, Safdar Awan, was arrested from the hotel they were staying in Karachi. The Karachi police is said to have broken into her hotel room and arrested Awan, who is a retired army officer, also an active member of a party, the PMLN. What was his crime? The police say he violated the sanctity of Muhammad Ali Jinnah's mausoleum in Karachi by chanting slogans inside the tomb. Maryam Nawaz says this is Imran Khan's way of blackmailing the opposition into calling off the protests. And blackmail it seems to be. Look at the actions taken by the Pakistan government in the past few days. It has been raiding the houses of opposition leaders, trying to block them from reaching protest sites. Hundreds of opposition workers have been put behind bars. Political activists have been taken into preventive custody. The police has been placing huge containers along bridges to block opposition rallies. Imran Khan is trying all he can to stop the protests from spreading. And he's issued a direct ultimatum to the architect of this movement, Mr. Nawaz Sharif. Imran Khan says that whenever his government gets a hold of Nawaz Sharif, they will not treat him like a VIP. They will lodge him in an ordinary jail. His words.
कि आपने जो मर्जी करना है, जितने मर्जी जलसे करने हैं, जिधर आपने कानून तोड़ा, मैं आपको आज वाजे कर रहा हूं कि मैं सीधा आप जेल में जाएंगे और वो जेल में नहीं, अब वीआईपी जेल में नहीं जाएंगे. अब जाएंगे जिधर आम बेचारा गरीब आदमी, गरीब जिधर मुस्लिम जाता है.
In other news, Pakistan is all set to remain on the Financial Action Task Force's grey list. The FATF plenary session begins on the 21st of October. Pakistan has failed to fulfill the terror watchdog's obligations, at least 6 of them. The foremost being action against terrorists like Masood Azhar and Hafiz Saeed. Reports say that 4 nominating countries, the US, the UK, France and Germany, are not satisfied with Pakistan's actions against terrorist organizations operating on its soil. Yet another grey listing is almost a given. The opposition is celebrating already. I'll leave you with this. Also in protest mode is Thailand. Students are leading this fight. Thailand's pro-democracy protesters are a feisty lot. Nothing seems to discourage them. Not water cannons, not riot police, not even rain. After 5 nights of relentless protest, the government seems to be budging though. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha wants talks now. But he's made one thing very clear. The monarchy in Thailand is not up for discussion. Here's a report.
This may look like a lively concert to you, but it's actually a battle for Thailand's future. For a 5th consecutive night, Thai students defied the ban on mass gatherings. Last week's crackdown has not dented their spirits. As Monday arrived, there was a slight drizzle around Bangkok, but not enough to keep the protesters away. 10,000 people gathered near Bangkok's Victory Monument, clad in colourful ponchos. They chanted, "Down with dictatorship" and reform the monarchy.
I want to be part of the fight to call for a democracy. This is our time. Everybody is out and we shouldn't be afraid of anything. We're all protesting peacefully and orderly. There's no chaos. Any violence that happened was started by the government.
Despite the urgency of the protests, a couple of things stood out. Almost everyone was wearing a mask. And on 2 separate occasions, the protesters cleared the road for approaching ambulances. An alliance of shared experiences is emerging between Thailand and Hong Kong. Massive street protests, an autocratic regime, and a brutal police response. There are striking similarities between Thailand and Hong Kong. On Monday, a group of pro-democracy activists gathered at the Thai consulate in Hong Kong. Among them was the Umbrella Movement leader, Joshua Wong. Their message was simple: Hong Kong stands with Thailand. Unlike last week, the government response in Bangkok was measured. No riot police, no water cannons, and no crackdown. A government spokesperson hinted that Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha wanted talks. He has recalled the parliament to thrash out a plan. Despite these mass protests, the monarchy remains beyond reproach.
What the government needs to do is to protect the monarchy. This is every Thai's duty. We're asking you guys to do just very few things. You can see the government is trying its best to compromise. We're asking so very few things. Don't do anything wrong. Don't damage government property.
The king himself was not in Bangkok. He was in Thailand's northeast. The irony is writ large. On one hand, a paternal monarch attends the graduation ceremony. On the other, he unleashes water cannons on student protesters seeking to undermine their demands. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And then we come to China. We've carried several reports on China's wolf warrior diplomats on this show. Abrasive government officials who are anything but diplomatic. Nothing beats the latest diplomatic firestorm they've triggered, though. A Taiwan government official is in hospital after being attacked by Chinese diplomats. Let me repeat that. Chinese diplomats physically assaulted an official from Taiwan. Let that sink in. This happened in Fiji during the Taiwan National Day celebrations. Here's the full story. Taiwan's de facto embassy in Fiji was celebrating the island's National Day at the Grand Pacific Hotel, a grand event with Fijian ministers and foreign diplomats as guests. Officials from the Chinese embassy were of course not invited for obvious reasons. So two Chinese diplomats decided to gate crash the venue. They turned up at the venue and started taking photographs of the guests. Taiwanese staff confronted them. They asked them to leave. And this was when the Chinese officials turned violent. They assaulted their Taiwanese counterparts so bad that one of them is currently in hospital with head injuries. The violence stopped only when the Fijian police intervened. Back in Taiwan, the entire country is appalled, and not surprisingly. The Taiwan Foreign Ministry has put out a strongly worded statement. Let me quote from it. We strongly condemn the violence against our diplomat in Fiji by China's uncivilized wolf warriors. As a sovereign state, we will continue celebrating our national day everywhere and every year. Taiwan is a force for good in the world, and we won't be intimidated. Wong Ting-yu, the co-chair of Taiwan's Foreign Affairs and National Defense Committee, has said, and I quote, "We cannot let China bully its way into doing whatever it wants." How has China responded? The Chinese Foreign Ministry sent Mr. Zhao Lijian to clarify. His response was both outrageous and laughable. He flipped the entire story. He accused Taiwanese officials of being provocative and assaulting Chinese embassy staff who were at the hotel apparently to carry out official duties. Which duties were these? He has not clarified that.
首先，台湾在斐济根本没有什么所谓外交官。
First of all, Taiwan has no so-called diplomats in Fiji. The Fiji government has long adhered to the correct position of the One China principle, and in 2019, it ordered Taiwan's commercial institutions in Fiji to refrain from using fake names or promoting the concept of One China, One Taiwan or Two Chinas in Fiji. China appreciates that. The relevant reports you mentioned is totally inconsistent with the facts. Taiwan is like a thief crying, "Stop thief."
完全不符，台方是贼喊捉贼。台机构人员对在同一酒店。
On that very evening, the staff of Taiwan's institution in Fiji launched verbal provocation and physical confrontation against the Chinese embassy staff, who were carrying out their official duties in the public area of the same hotel, causing injuries to one Chinese diplomat and damage to his belongings. The Chinese embassy in Fiji has expressed grave concerns to Fiji over the incident and demanded the Fiji authorities to conduct thorough investigation and hold the Taiwanese personnel accountable in accordance with the law.
对此进行彻查，并依法追究台方人员的责任。
In accordance with the law, says Mr. Zhao Lijian. Which law is he talking about? The ones that do not apply to China's wolf warriors. What happened in Fiji is not an isolated incident. Chinese diplomats have bullied their way into several official meetings abroad. In 2017, an intergovernmental meeting hosted by the Australian Foreign Minister in Perth had to be suspended due to the Chinese delegation. They just could not stop shouting. Chinese diplomats kept interrupting the speakers over the inclusion of Taiwan in this meeting. In 2018, a Chinese envoy was asked to leave a diplomatic gathering on the island of Nauru. The president of the island state himself described the Chinese officials as an insolent and a bully for speaking out of turn. If you need more proof of their abrasiveness, look at this tweet. Just this year in February, the Chinese Consul General in Kolkata threatened to eradicate a Twitter user. Eradicate is the word. Just like the coronavirus. He threatened to eradicate him. Abrasive, combative, aggressive, and now violent. China's style of diplomacy has progressed from bad to worse. Chinese diplomats come wolf warriors are in urgent need of some re-education. Now, when members of the Quad met earlier this month, they left on a rather disappointing note. The high point was a cake. The low point, the lack of a joint statement. Separate statements were issued by the four members, India, Australia, Japan and the United States. Little was said about tackling China's aggression as a collective force. Well, that may be beginning to change. Members of the Quad are now giving their alliance a distinct military dimension. India has invited Australia to join the Malabar exercises next month, while Japan is arming an adversary of China to strengthen its hand. Our next story tells you more.
The new Japanese Prime Minister has made a big move on his first foreign trip. Yoshihide Suga has roped in another ally in the fight against China. Japan has agreed to supply Vietnam with military gear.
It's a big step in the field of security and defense cooperation between the two countries. We reached an agreement in principle on the transfers of defense equipment and technology, and I believe that it will advance further.
This is a move to rein in China's expansionist tendencies. Back in May, Vietnam was weighing an international arbitration case against Beijing as the Chinese Navy stepped up its drills in the South China Sea. Vietnam is one of the 7 claimants to the disputed region. Japan's decision to arm Vietnam is part of a larger regional security strategy that is now taking shape. After the foreign minister level talks in Tokyo, the Quad is now gaining a clear military dimension. Australia will join India, Japan and the United States in this year's Malabar exercise. India, that organizes these naval drills, has confirmed the participation of the Australian Navy. The prospect of the Quad combining forces against China is a daunting one for Beijing, because the combined military strength of the 4 allies leaves the Chinese forces outmatched and outnumbered. The Quad has listed 6 goals for itself. 2 of them are directly linked to security. The Quad wants to establish a broad security alliance in the Indo-Pacific. They also want to include ASEAN countries within the bloc. Vietnam has taken a leadership position in ASEAN this year. It is the current chair of this alliance. Vietnam's Prime Minister today reaffirmed his commitment to work with Japan.
The two sides have reaffirmed the importance of maintaining safety, stability and freedom of navigation, both over the water and air in the South China Sea. We agreed to promote dispute solving through peaceful solutions, restrain from the use of force or threaten to use force, abiding to international law, especially the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
China tried to take advantage of the pandemic to assert itself militarily across disputed territories. From the Ladakh border with India to the South China Sea, the Dragon has heightened security risks with its military moves. The Quad is answering China's aggression by building a bigger military alliance. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Leaders resign for a number of reasons. Lack of public support, party infighting, poor health, just to name a few. But UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson could very well resign over his salary. He thinks it's too less. Some Tory MPs claim Johnson is considering going back to public speaking, which used to fetch him a lot more money. Our next report tells you where the world leaders are indeed an underpaid lot.
Boris Johnson wants out. After 16 months at number 10 Downing Street, the British Prime Minister is planning to resign. Or at least, that's what a group of Tory MPs claim. Johnson feels he's not getting paid enough. As Prime Minister, he's entitled to a salary of $195,129. That's $16,260 per month. It's a comfortable salary by British standards, but nowhere close to what Johnson earned before he entered the job. A couple of speeches used to fetch him around $200,000. He also wrote a newspaper column for $30,000. In physical terms, the premiership was a step down for Boris Johnson. It also didn't help that his predecessor was raking in big money. Theresa May has been hitting the British lecture circuit since quitting last year. She's earned close to $1.3 million from speaking engagements. Reports say Johnson is privately jealous of Theresa May. He believes he could pull in at least twice that amount. Boris Johnson is also going through a lean patch. He is believed to have lost much of his life savings in a divorce settlement earlier this year. It's not clear how many children Johnson has fathered, but some of them are young enough to need financial assistance. Like his son Wilfred, who Johnson intends on sending to Eton. That's more than $50,000 a year. So Johnson's checkbook is clearly not balancing. But his plan to resign has reignited an old debate. Does public service qualify as a job? Shouldn't your personal finances be covered before you run for office? The counter-argument is that wealth should not be a prerequisite. There's a reason why you don't hear leaders complaining about their salary. It's political suicide. Just take a look at what major countries pay their leaders. The US President draws $400,000 annually. The Australian Prime Minister draws a similar amount. Both Canada and Germany pay their elected leaders around $260,000. France and the UK languish at the bottom among Western powers, with leaders drawing around $200,000. Closer home in India, the Prime Minister is paid $32,700 per year. The UK's Prime Minister is paid less compared to his Western counterparts. With his personal finances in a shambles, Johnson's plan to resign could be his only option. Tory MPs say he will stay on for another 6 months, sort out the Brexit talks, and lead Britain through the pandemic before resigning. An anticlimactic finish for a man who spent years chasing the premiership. Behind the scenes, 5 contenders are hoping to replace Boris Johnson. Finance Minister Rishi Sunak is the bookies' favourite. In case you're wondering, Sunak is the richest MP in the Commons, worth at least $260 million. Financial security shouldn't be a problem for him. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
"15 days to go for the US election day. Faith has now taken center stage. Both the president and his challenger are eager to showcase how their campaigns are guided by faith. All of a sudden, the US president loves going to church. His rival Joe Biden is attending mass ceremonies. And we thought that weaponizing religion during polls was a third world thing. Well, the race for the White House continues to surprise. In the next 3 minutes, we'll tell you how, starting with images of the US president attending church services at the International Church of Las Vegas. This is an evangelical mega church with contemporary musical programs. Trump has always worked closely with evangelical Christians. He's put their causes of restricting abortion and preserving gun ownership on top of his political agenda, but Trump went to church only to seek blessings, which he did. Addressing the gathering, one of the pastors said that at 4:30 a.m. the Lord told her that Trump was going to be the president again. Take a look.
At 4:30, the Lord said to me, I am going to give your president a second win.
That is precise communication from the Lord. The congregation then began praying for their president. As they prayed, Donald Trump kept himself busy counting money before he donated it. It seems as if he was struggling to decide the right amount to donate. But after much deliberation with himself, he settled for $20 and dropped them in a bucket titled Change for Change. His critics say the billionaire president should have donated more. Trump supporters say they couldn't care less.
Everything that he's promised to do, he's taken care of.
Like what?
Best economy that we've had in quite a while. He has built the wall. What am I missing?
Okay. I do honestly feel that what's happening now with the most corrupt man ever to run for president Joe Biden, then you deserve to vote for him and get what you get. I think Trump is the best man we have ever had.
Speaking of Joe Biden, last week he was spotted leaving a mass ceremony in Delaware. Remember, Biden has frequently stressed on how his Catholic faith has guided his actions as a public official. So on Sunday, he participated in a virtual event with African American faith leaders. He asked these leaders to pray for him so that he has the capacity to carry out his job when he becomes the president.
This is so much bigger than criminal justice. This is so much more than policing. If we're going to finally rip out the systemic racism that still affects our laws, our institutions, our culture.
So Donald Trump is trying to woo white evangelicals. Biden is catering to black Protestants. Both their campaigns are working hard to court other key religious blocs. But how much of a role does religion really play in the U.S. election? The Pew Research Center recently conducted a survey of the key religious blocs in America, and this is what they found. 78% of white evangelical Protestants said that they will vote for Trump if the election were to be held today. Only 17% prefer Biden. Among white, non-evangelical Protestants, 53% prefer Trump, 43% lean towards the Democrats. White Catholic voters, Trump is again ahead by 8 percentage points. 52% in this group said that they would vote for Trump and 44% for Biden. Now compare that with black Protestant voters. 90% favor Biden, only 9% back Trump. Among Hispanic Catholics, Biden leads with 67%. 26% say they would vote for Trump. Jewish Americans, 27% say they will vote for Trump. More than 70% Jews prefer Biden. Among atheist and agnostic voters, 11% said that they will vote for Trump, 83% prefer Biden. What do the figures tell you? There are deep divisions among white Christians and almost everybody else in America. Most of them support Donald Trump, and they account for roughly 44% of registered American voters. Will they manage to give the president another term? We shall find out in 2 weeks. On that note, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.